What is going on, though, as well as that, is the COVID inquiry. Of course, later on today, we're supposed to be seeing Chris Whitty and former Chief Scientific Advisor Sir Patrick Vallance. They're supposed to be give evidence to the COVID inquiry on the 8th day of public hearings, but we haven't as yet seen either of them, and we'll bring that to you as soon as we can. Right now, though, let's talk to Arabella Skinner, who's from Us For Them, an organisation that has doggedly charted exactly where the government went wrong, particularly with regard to closing schools, particularly with regards to the way that children were treated, particularly with regards to things like homework. And the other problem that an awful lot of children faced during lockdown was just the isolation of it all. And so far, we've learned very little from the COVID inquiry about any of that stuff. Arabella, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks very much for talking to us. I mean, I've been a bit disappointed thus far with the COVID inquiry. It doesn't appear to have kind of given me anything that I wanted to know. It hasn't sort of revealed anything that I would have wanted to ask, and it's all been rather pedestrian so far, hasn't it?
I think you're absolutely right, Mike. I think one of the things we have to remember that this is only the very, very first bit of the COVID inquiry.
Yeah.
They're only interested in pandemic planning. What was the planning process? We don't even know when they're going to talk about children and education.
Right.
They've announced 6 modules. The 6th one starts in mid-2024.
Oh, great.
And children still are not included. Our children will be, children who were affected going into secondary school probably won't even have a module for them until they leave university. It's utterly ridiculous.
Isn't it just? Yeah. And why is that? Who made that decision?
Well, if you remember back to sort of 18 months ago when the terms of reference actually came out, children weren't even included in the terms of reference. And Us For Them with other people challenged this and they added children in. But this really comes back to what we felt was a fundamental issue throughout the whole pandemic. No one was interested in children, no one was thinking about children, and no one was thinking about what the ramifications of the decisions that were made were actually happening on children and adults. Dame Sally said, we didn't plan for a lockdown. Well, if you didn't plan for a lockdown, you needed to look and see what the damage was and look at that in detail and see and make decisions based on what that was happening.
Well, exactly right, because one of the things that I think we all are concerned with is that if there were to be another pandemic, and everybody seems to think there will be one at some point, I'm not so sure myself, you'd want to be sure that you don't make the same mistakes that they made by locking everything down when they didn't need to.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right there, Mike. And one of the things that I find most depressing is that we keep saying, oh, look at these figures. We've got 40% up in self-harm in teenage girls. We've got 40% up in eating disorders. We've got 1.7 million persistently absent children from school. Then they go, oh, we didn't know this was going to happen. We did know this was going to happen. You go back to February 20 when they were talking about different things. The school closures were not on the agenda. But when they started talking about it, they said this was one of the risks. July 20, there was a big piece of work done by the Department of Health looking at risks and benefits. They talked about this as a possibility. November 20, Spivey, one of the planning, the behavioural psychologists, plus the Department for Education, did a massive piece of work looking at what the implications were for the original school closures. They said more children will die from suicide than die from COVID this year. And yet we shut down schools again. That's what I find so unforgivable about this process.
Yeah, and the thing that worries me slightly even more than what happened under the Tories is that Starmer and the Labour Party would have probably done it for longer and would have done it and kept it on for longer, because he never wanted to lift the ban on schools closing, did he?
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. There's a huge amount of backtracking going on at the moment. A lot of the media are talking about saying we knew this was happening, this is awful, this is terrible, we need to do something about it. And with a few honourable exceptions, and I would include yourself in that, like very, very, very few people were talking about this and talking about this as an issue.
Yeah, and I saw it firsthand because I had 2 teenage boys who are now 16 and 18, but who were sort of 16 and 14. And I mean, I was at the point where I was going down to see them at the weekend and saying, go out and hang around on a street corner, drink some cider, go and do something, because they were just sitting around at home, kind of twiddling their thumbs. They didn't have any work to do. There was hardly any homework given out. They were told, well, you can do the homework if you want to, but there was no pressure. And it was unbelievable what they were told that they could just get away with.
You're absolutely right. And I think one of the things we kept hearing was children resilient. Children aren't resilient. They learn resilience. Children are adaptable, and they're adaptable to the environment that they grow up in. If they are taught that actually really doesn't matter if you hand that in, really doesn't matter if you do that piece of work, we're seeing all of those ramifications. We're seeing that in the number of children that are absent from school. We're seeing that in the number of parents who don't send their children to school, or parents who are unable to get their children into school. I mean, when Dame Sally is saying she's seeing that at her Cambridge college, then we have to worry.
Yeah. I think so, because I think one of the things as well that it affected, and we don't often talk about parents, but I think an awful lot of parents before this pandemic saw school as a kind of slightly scary place. They didn't really want to get a letter from the school to say your child's been absent or your child's taken the morning off without anything. Whereas now, I think most parents go, well, you know, they told us we didn't have to do anything for 2 years, so the hell with them. And if they want us to turn up, then maybe they shouldn't have shut down for 2 years.
I think you're absolutely right. And Ofsted has said this, as has the Children's Commissioner, that there is a breakdown in the social contract.
Yeah.
A lot of parents are thinking, well, actually a day off here. Or also parents are often working from home. So when in the past you say a child on a Friday would say, oh, I'm not feeling very well, you'd send your child to school because you know they were just wanting to get, parents are going, stay home.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases, we have children who have missed so much school that they cannot catch up, and therefore they don't want to get into the system. We're only supporting 1% of those children who are struggling with going to school. And when Dame Sally says we need to do something now to help them, we absolutely do. We should have been doing this 2 years ago. So Kevin Collins actually resigned because his plan was rejected, and he was the man put in place to look at recovery. We've had 2.5 years since the first lockdown, and we need to be absolutely addressing those children who actually have real issues getting into school, because we are creating a generational crisis for those children and society as we go forward.
No question. And also, I mean, let's look at the situation with exams as well, where they basically were just given a grade. They didn't have to do an exam. It was all kind of just made up.
Yeah, and then you're seeing huge problems with children who are then going to university and having to do exams, although we're also finding that lots of those students at the moment aren't getting their exams marked because the university lecturers are on strike, or they're given 24 hours remotely to do their exams. So we're fundamentally, we're failing our children at every point.
Yes.
And not giving, we're just not... We are not a society that has focused on the future and focused on our children and giving them the support they need.
Yeah, unbelievable stuff. Well, listen, Arabella, we'll just keep an eye on it and try and keep them honest and try and keep them on the sort of beaten track, if you like, to try and come up with some answers as opposed to what they've come up with so far. I take your point about the fact that it's very early stages yet and it's just about pandemic planning, but we need to know more, and we need to know more in detail exactly what happened. Arabella Skinner, thank you very much indeed from us for them.